Welcome everybody to the March 15th EGLE Classroom EnviroSchool webinar, and this is titled What Makes EGLE Spatial? So we're going to be talking about how we can use geographic information to ask and answer questions about Michigan's environment, and we have some wonderful presenters here to share the way that they use geographic information systems in their everyday work. Just to start off, for those of you who are not as familiar with what we do here at EGLE, our mission as a department is to protect Michigan's environment and public health by managing air, water, land, and energy resources in the state. We do this through a variety of different ways. We enforce state and federal rules that are designed to protect the state's natural resources and its people. This includes enforcing pollution laws, investigating toxic spills and other emergencies, testing drinking water in municipal and private wells, helping to redevelop formerly contaminated sites, and so on. So you'll hear a little bit about some of that work today in the presentations. Our staff work with businesses, with industries, with state and local governments, and the public to reduce or eliminate pollution through monitoring that of air quality, water quality, drinking water, soils. We work on limiting pollutants from entering the air and the water and the soil through our permitting. We inspect sources of pollutions to make sure they're complying with regulations. And then we also offer outreach and technical assistance on how to comply with state and federal environmental laws and how to move beyond simple compliance to actual sustainability as a long-term way of life. We also provide financial assistance to help organizations and to help communities upgrade and construct infrastructure to protect public health and the environment, especially in the areas of wastewater, drinking water, brownfield redevelopments, renewable energy, recycling, and all of that and more. So more than half of our budget actually flows back into communities in loans and grants to help protect the environment and the public. It's a little bit about what we do, a little bit about how we're laid out as an organization. We have a bunch of different divisions and offices that help achieve our mission. You can see those 6 sort of bluish boxes on the top are what we call our program divisions, where we have a lot of the actual regulatory activities that take place. So you can see in previous EnviroSchool events, if you've been with us, we have had folks from water resources, from drinking water, from oil, gas, and minerals, and from our materials management division. Today, we've got some representatives from our materials management and remediation and redevelopment division. That one's a tongue twister, as well as our support services. So that includes things like finance, information management, and other support services, which is where I, as the environmental education coordinator, am also housed. So you'll hear some great information from different parts of our department today. The Educator Series really is an initiative of EGLE Classroom, which is our environmental education program, and it's meant to just provide support to Michigan educators to help them learn more about Michigan's environment so that they can teach more effectively about it in the classroom or in their non-formal programs. And this really helps us advance our mission of protecting the environment and public health because it helps us make sure that the people of the state are environmentally literate and they understand what they can and should do to help protect Michigan's environment alongside us, because we need everybody to be acting responsibly to protect the environment. And it also provides connections between our staff here at the state and the educators who are out doing the great work of educating Michigan's communities so that you all can make those connections and ask questions and get information that you need yourself. So thank you for being here. This is a new initiative in 2023, and we're really happy to have you on board with us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce and hand it over to today's presenters. We have Kate Berg, who is the GIS lead in our information management division. We have Kent Walters, who is a geologist in our materials management division, and we have Chris Svoboda, who is a geologist in our remediation and redevelopment division. So they each have some great stuff to share about how they use GIS in their everyday work and some resources for you on how you can incorporate it into some of the things that you do too. So I'm going to hand it over, first of all, to Kate, who, if any of you participated in the Michigan Green Schools program this year, you might know Kate very well. She's been our Green Schools extraordinaire helper and has some cool stuff to share. So I'm going to go ahead and quit sharing and hand it over to Kate.
Thank you, Eileen. Screen looks good, I hope.
Yes, it looks great.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. So thank you for that intro, Eileen. I am Kate Berg, and my title is GIS lead here at EGLE. And so that means that I am providing mapping and data support for all those divisions, the program divisions that Eileen showed you earlier. And that support can cover a bunch of different things, including the administration and the licensing of our mapping tools and software, troubleshooting, helping, Chris and Kent here today with any of the issues that they're having, as well as training our staff. And sometimes I get to have fun as creator and developer and actually create some mapping and data tools that we'll show today. My favorite role is that of GIS champion. So that means I am here today to talk to you guys about it, but also let other people know at our division what we can do to help improve their workflow. So I love talking about this, but I said GIS, and I realize that's an acronym, and you might not be familiar with it. It stands for Geographic Information Systems, and that is how we at EGLE are managing our mapping and spatial data. And this is a very powerful tool, very powerful technology to help analyze and visualize data, and it plays a really important role in our mission today to protect Michigan's environment, protect our public health. But what is it exactly? I said it's a system for managing and analyzing data, but I like to take a step back and compare it to ogres. And I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the 2001 cinematic masterpiece that is Shrek, in which an ogre, rescues a princess. And in this movie, ogres are compared to onions. And why are they compared to onions, you might ask? It's because they have layers. So both ogres and onions have layers. I think in the movie they were getting at depth. They have some depth to them, but GIS also has layers, and in that respect, it's slightly different. So in GIS, we have a layer of data showing us certain information about the world. So in this case, you can see on the left, we have the real world going on, and then on the right, we have our GIS data layers. And so you can see that each of these layers is a great way to visualize patterns in the world and provide some information. But the power of GIS is combining all of these different layers together to give us a big picture to better understand the world and protect the environment. So you can kind of think of this like Google Maps. If you just had a hard copy of streets in your area, that's really helpful, but it could be better, right? You can have buildings on there. You can have traffic showing you, where the bottlenecks are, and we can have points showing where cops are. And altogether, all these different layers on Google Map, it's giving you a really great view of your commute, and you're able to make an informed decision about how you might want to change your commute. And in this way, GIS and Google Maps, they allow us to connect where things are with what things are, how things are. And so we're able to answer a lot of questions. And that's why I think it's such a really neat tool. And that's why I'm really excited to share with you what we're doing at EGLE today. So at the core, again, is this layer. It's a single source of GIS or geospatial information, and we can do lots of things with it. And I'm going to give you a little overview of some of those things, and then Chris and Kent will give some more in-depth demos of what they're using GIS for. So at EGLE, we are using GIS data, or GIS, to model and analyze data, and this helps us inform decisions. We're using it also to streamline our workflows, and that means we're able to be more productive. And then we're also working really hard to share our data. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can access our data yourself, use it in the classroom, use it for personal, have fun with it. So let's dive into each of these for a second. So here's an example of how we're using geographic information systems to inform decisions. This is an example from our air quality division, and they're using it to calculate, analyze, and visually demonstrate emission reductions or increases of methane. So you can see on the left here, that's what I'm kind of talking about when I'm saying layers. We have a couple different layers being shown. We have a blue polygon showing non-attainment areas, and these are areas of concern that we want to look at. We have these squares. We've broken the state off into grids, and we've given it the emissions in 2017 as well as 2018 and 2019. And so we can kind of see how emissions have changed in these areas over time and where we might want to focus our efforts. So our air quality division is using this to support internal work, to have conversations with stakeholders, and then to also inform their decisions on different methodology for calculating emissions. Here's an example about how we're using geographic information systems to enhance our productivity. This is from the Water Resources Division, and you see a couple guys there from our dam safety unit. So they're responsible for going to all the dams in the state and inspecting them, making sure that they are all good to go. And they use what's called Survey 123. This is a field data collection tool that allows them to collect data right there in the field. It has GPS tied with it, so we have a direct point of where they are, where they collected the point, where the issue might be if they do see one. And the really neat thing is that it seamlessly integrates with the main dam database back in the office. So people can be collecting this data out in the field, and people who are in the office that need the data immediately can see it. Excuse me. All right, and last but not least, we're using GIS to share and educate the public, share with the public and educate them. So I have right here a screenshot of our maps and data page, and I would like to show that to you right now. Ooh, I did the wrong thing. Here we go. Okay, so this is our centralized location for all of the maps and data that we have here at EGLE. And we've broken it up into a couple different types of the content that we're putting out there. So we have maps and apps, and these are interactive applications that you can go through and see different data sources, as well as see what's going on different topics. We also have dashboards here. Story maps are a really fun tool that I'll dive into, as well as data systems and open data. So let's start with some of our maps and apps. Most recently, we've updated our grants and loans dashboard. So this shows all the locations in the state that we have distributed a grant or loan to. And so we can see different areas in the state. Well, it's taken a second to load there. I assure you we don't have 2 grants and loans. So give that a second to load. But it's a really cool dashboard that allows you to filter by different grant programs, filter by EGLE program, for example, and we can change what's being shown on the dashboard with that data. So it's a great way to communicate with the public. We also use it internally to get a high-level view of what's going on different topics. Let's see. This was another new one that we just put out showing sampling data that was collected at a site north of Grand Rapids. And we'll give that a second to load as well. Here's one of my favorite topics to show off is our electric vehicle web app. I think this is a really great way of showing where electrical vehicles are in the state, where the electric vehicle corridors are, and where we can improve and have more electrical vehicles installed, or electric vehicle stations, excuse me, installed. So the cool thing about interactive maps is that it's not just static. We can zoom in to an area of interest. We can click on a point and learn a little bit more about what that is showing us. We have tables that we can click on and see the data in a table view as well. That can be filtered by the map extent. We also have fun widgets over on the side here. So if we wanted to calculate directions between different charging stations, we can click that button. Excuse me. Near me tools, we can change the base map if we wanted to have a more overall view of what's going on with aerial imagery and things like that. So that's a really cool part that we have with our interactive maps. Go back to this site. So these are sampling results that were taken, and this is part of our effort at EGLE to really improve our transparency and show what's going on and what we're collecting. So you can see all the results for different samples right here on this site. Another great tool is our story maps. I like this and would especially encourage this for teachers who maybe have final reports in your classes. This is a way to combine narratives with maps and images in a seamless kind of story. So you can see here we're talking about bioengineering in inland lakes, and we have a map showing all these examples of successful places where we've replaced shorelines to be more environmentally friendly. And we can click on one, see where it is on the map, and learn a little bit more about that effort. So story maps are one of my favorite tools. And the last thing that I want to show you today is our data section on the site. So this is all of our open data that is available for you to download and explore on your own. So for example, we can find that electric vehicle data. I can click on it and we see it again in map form on this open data site. We can also click here to check out a table. But we can also go to our download page here. And it's really easy to just download Google Earth. It's a very easy way to deal with spatial data. And I can download a KML, which is the Google Earth file, and open it up right in here. So now you're able to see all those electric vehicle charging stations, in the state of Michigan, where they are. And we can click on them and get those additional attributes again that we saw in that pop-up in the web app. So this would be a really fun way to have different environmental exercises in the classroom, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's watersheds, drinking water sampling, things like that. We have a lot of open data here. 247 items here that are available to the public to explore on your own. So with that, that's a very high overview of what we have available on our Maps and Data portal. We will be putting this in the chat as well as following up with this link. And I'd like to pass it over to Kent now to share a little bit more about how he's using GIS.
Awesome, thanks, Kate. I'm not sure how to follow a Shrek analogy. That was pretty awesome, but I'll do my best. So, hi everyone. My name is Kent Walters. I'm with the Materials Management Division of EGLE, and which primarily works with landfills across the state of Michigan. And I'm a geologist working out of the Grand Rapids District Office. And I want to talk to you guys about two things that I use pretty much almost every day. With GIS, and one of them is historical aerial imagery. And the way I'm going to use it for this particular site is to help create sort of a long-term operation and maintenance plan for a specific landfill site. So the site that we're looking at here is the landfill is outlined in sort of that orangish yellow polygon. And one of the things that's unique about this site is it sits right adjacent to one of the largest rivers in the state of Michigan. And so if we zoom into sort of that area right by the river, we can see there's a part of the landfill that's a hardened shoreline, which basically means there's riprap or rocks, something to protect it from the stream from eroding the landfill out. And then there's also a soft shoreline where there's really no protection other than sort of a wetlandy, marshy type feature that would give it some sort of buffer zone. And so when I'm thinking about long-term management, I'm thinking, okay, is this soft shoreline, could that be an issue down the road? We don't obviously want part of the landfill to wash out and go out into the Great Lakes. That would be really bad. So is there something that I should be concerned about or thinking about? And how do I figure that out? So if we go back to sort of this zoomed out view, higher elevation view, one of the features that I noticed is the stream. Obviously, it's pretty a prominent feature in the area, and specifically, if you can see where my cursor is, this area right here, it looks like there's been some erosion in this area, but this is obviously just a snapshot in time. So, can I use, well, actually, let me turn my laser pointer on. Oh, there we go. Can I use historical imagery to help me understand what's better going on at this site? So if we zoom back in time about close to 100 years, we can see that it does look a lot different. And I'm going to flip it one more time just so you can pay attention to a specific area. But right where I'm kind of highlighting with my pointer here, keep your eye in that area, and we'll just fade it in again. And you can see that it does change a lot. So back in history, this stream channel is actually in a much different location than it is currently. So that to me would suggest there has been a lot of erosion happening in this area. And then the next question I'm asking is this erosion, is this migrating stream channel, could that potentially impact the presence of this landfill over here? So what we can do is, again, we look back and we can go through and take a look at all the historical imagery that's available to us. And what I did is I just kind of make a little animation here that sort of shows all the historical imagery, and it progresses through time. And I have these colorful lines that show sort of the different shorelines or shore banks of where the stream has been at specific years. And it just gives a good idea of how that stream channel has changed through time. And it's really helpful to understand that when developing long-term strategies. So we can, sort of look at a static image here to get a good look at it, and we can see how that's changed. But the reason why it's important is we can take a look at, one of the earliest images we have in 1938, compare it to 2022. And what we can do is take a measurement of that area, 355 feet, and we know when those images were taken because they're photographs and they're time stamped. And we can do a pretty simple calculation to determine, what that erosion rate is over time. And what we find out is about 4.2 feet per year, this stream channel kind of migrates southward, further closer to this stream channel over here. And, another thing we can do is we can measure the distance of what's remaining here, which is about 146 feet. And we can back calculate that. And it turns out, maybe in about 35 years, this stream channel might erode out and erode out into this channel. And why that's important is because if you think about the water flowing down here, if it starts to flow into this channel, potentially there's a chance that this soft shoreline area could be at risk. Now, this doesn't account for major flooding events or precipitation events where a large event could erode this all out in an hour or a day or something like that. But let's just say if everything progresses at that same erosion rate, maybe about 35 years, so we can kind of make a plan to say maybe around that time we should start thinking and be more cautious about it. Maybe observe this area more frequently. So. It's a useful tool, and this information is available to you guys too. So one of the websites that I can go to and show you guys is at the United States Geological Survey, and it's called their Earth Explorer, and hopefully everything goes well. So far, so good. And we can zoom over into Michigan, and I'll just zoom into Grand Haven area. And we can select the area we're interested in, go to our data sets. They have an aerial imagery tab along with a bunch of other data sets. And this one, we can just do single frames, click that, and we can click our results tab. And then you can see it's searching, and then there you go. It shows all the different aerial photos, historical, that are available for you to download and keep on your own computer. So you can see 1980s, 1974s, and it goes on and on and on. So lots of data available for you to download and to keep for yourselves and use for educational purposes, or really personally, just if you're curious about, what did my home look like back, 100 years ago. So that's how I use historical aerial imagery. The other thing that I use really frequently is LiDAR, which is light detection and ranging. And what we use this information, or what we use this GIS information is to, I'll use quotations, to see through vegetation. And this background I have on here is an example of LiDAR data, and you can see it really makes just the topography stand out visually, and it's pretty astounding. This is actually in Muskegon County. You can see some different kettle lakes, which are glacial formations, and some relic dune formations over here. So it just really makes things stand out. And you're probably wondering, what the heck is LiDAR? Well, it took this straight from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. LiDAR uses light in the form of pulsed laser to measure ranges or distances to the Earth. So try to imagine an airplane that's flying, and it shoots lasers down to the Earth, and those bounce back to the instrument. It takes measurements. It knows what the elevation of whatever it bounces off, like the ground or trees or a building. And so it knows what that elevation is. And then what's really neat about it is you can basically delete out any information that bounces off trees or off buildings. So what's really left is what we call a bare earth imagery, which means there's no trees, there's no buildings. It's just a reflection of the Earth's surface. And like on this map here, you can see there's a pretty good river valley here. You can see that there's a highway going through here and some other pretty cool features. It really gives you a good idea, like which way the land is sloping over long distances, and it just gives you a pretty instant view of what the landscape looks like. So how do I use this in my current day job? Well, we actually get a lot of complaints from the public about dumping. And typically what we would want to do when we get a complaint is we would want to follow up and see, like, if there's someone dumping something somewhere, to see if they're breaking any solid waste laws, and basically try to mitigate any of those risks. And so in this example, we have a property I've highlighted here. We got a dumping complaint. They said, someone reported to us that they thought someone was dumping stuff back here. And from a desktop review, just from the aerial that we see here, it doesn't really look like much is going on. At least we can't see much is going on. We see there's a house here. There's a power line going through here. There's a lot of trees. There's one thing that maybe would stand out. It looks like the vegetation over here looks a little bit different, maybe a little more stressed. But other than that, nothing much that you can really notice with the bare eye. But like I mentioned before, the LiDAR allows you to sort of delete out those trees to get a reflection of what's on the surface of the Earth. So if we do that, we can fade in the LiDAR information, and wow, like it looks a lot different. You can see, there's actually a lot of stuff that's been piled up here. We don't know what it is, but we can tell that there's definitely been some activity where there's material that's been piled up in this area, and something probably excavated out of this area. So it gives us a pretty instant idea that, well, maybe this dumping complaint has some merit behind it, and that we should follow up. And then it allows us to help mitigate any risks. If there's any issues with whatever's placed here, if it could potentially have any risks to the environment or nearby drinking water wells, it gives us a good look and gives us an idea of what we might be dealing with before we even get to the site. So that's just a really, really awesome tool that you can use. This is the way that I use it, but obviously in the educational world, you can use it in many, many other different ways. And this information is available for you as well at the USGS website. And if we go to the National Map Viewer, let that load up. And we can zoom in to an area. Maybe. Zoom in over here. And we can go to the layer list. And if we scroll down to the 3-depth elevation hillshade stretch is what you're looking for. If you click that, it'll take a minute to load because it's got a lot of information in it. So just be patient. It will load. But basically it gives you the same information that I've been showing on my backgrounds, which is this LiDAR information, which gives you sort of that expression of the Earth's surface. So here you can instantly see there's some pretty cool ravines that cut through and go into the Grand River. This is actually Grand Valley State University campus, some of these ravines. And what's also cool, this website is you can do different things like draw profiles, and we can click here and click there, and it'll make you like an elevation profile so you can see the elevation change. And you can also just get some point elevations if you're curious. So how high is that? You can click 2 different points, and then you can say, oh, there's about 50 feet of elevation between those 2 points that I plopped on the map there. And it could be used however you want to. And also you can use this, you can also download this information and use it in whatever program that you'd like to use. So yeah, it's just awesome information. And this backdrop here is some nice coastal parabolic dunes over on Lake Michigan. I thought those are kind of cool to show. Yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for listening. Hopefully you found both the aerial imagery, historical imagery, and LiDAR information useful, that maybe you can use it in different ways. I find it personally interesting and just exciting to look at on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't get old. So with that, I will pass it over to Chris to give information on what he's working on.
Thanks so much, Kent. And let me get my screen sharing going on here. So hello, everybody. I'm Chris Swoboda. I am the district geologist for the Jackson district in the Remediation and Redevelopment Division. In the Remediation and Redevelopment Division, we do a couple things. We work on the cleanup of contaminated sites. That's the remediation part, and that's where I focus most of my time. But there is also the redevelopment side where we, give advice and provide funding for people to redevelop previously contaminated sites for new uses. So that's what we do in RRD, and we call it RRD, right? Because as Eileen said, Remediation and Redevelopment Division is a bit of a tongue twister. So RRD rolls off the tongue just a little bit easier. So I'm going to talk about the things that we use in RRD, and me specifically, that we use GIS for. I'm going to give 3 sort of quick demos. I'm hoping I have enough time to, go through them in enough detail, but also not, overwhelm you with information. I'm going to show you our Gelman web app, which is a public-facing website that we've developed for one of the sites that we work on. I'm going to show you our environmental mapper, which is sort of a clearinghouse that's publicly available, that sort of, I guess, collates all of RRD's, sites, the locations that we work on. So you can query that to see where are the contaminated sites nearby you. And then last but not least, I'm going to show you, I call it my dry cleaner triage GIS model. This is a GIS model that I developed for a project where we are looking at the many, current and former dry cleaners in the state of Michigan. And I'll explain a little bit more about that when I get there. But we're going to start with Gelman. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Gelman, it is a contaminated site in Ann Arbor. It's probably one of the 5 biggest contaminated sites in the state of Michigan, at least that EGLE manages. So from the 1960s until the 1980s, the Gelman Corporation was disposing of waste containing a chemical called 1,4-dioxane into unlined lagoons on their property. And that dioxane has gone into the groundwater, and it has basically caused a very long plume of dioxane that stretches over about 4 miles. The Gelman site is, as I mentioned, it's one of the biggest sites in Michigan because it is in Ann Arbor, where people are wealthier and more educated. There is a lot of public interest as well, and I believe that that's one of the reasons that this web app was sort of created as a way to share that information with the public and for the public to be able to go and get some information about it on their own. So without further ado, I'm going to get into it. If you go to the website, you'll be greeted with this little pop-up. It just sort of explains, we are committed to accessibility and transparency. So we've made this. It was, built using a geologic model that I'm not going to talk about because I could spend an hour talking about that. But so you'll be greeted by this. You click OK. You also get this how to use this map pop up, but I'm just going to get rid of that. So this is the sort of Gelman site, and this is, there's a lot of data here. So I'm going to turn some things on and off just to show you. So here's Ann Arbor. And this big purple blob that you see smeared out here, that is what we affectionately call the Gelman plume. And so, there's some boundaries here. You can see the darker colors are representative of where you have higher concentrations of dioxane. The Gelman property itself is right here. It's this orange polygon here. And as you can sort of see, some of the highest concentrations, these are in groundwater. These exist on the Gelman property. And then, as I mentioned, they were dumping the dioxane in the lagoons from the 1960s to the 1980s. And then they stopped dumping it in the 1980s, but you have, the ensuing almost 40 years of history. And due to that, that the contamination has spread considerably. It is now approaching, the leading edge where we define of the plume is approaching downtown Ann Arbor. And eventually it's expected that it'll basically travel out of the groundwater and into the Huron River. And hopefully it'll happen at concentrations that are sort of lower than our regulatory criteria. The boundaries, sort of these darker lines, are those various criteria. So 7.2 parts per billion is our drinking water criteria. 280 parts per billion is what we allow it to go into surface water at, and 1900 parts per billion is the vapor intrusion criteria. So basically, vapors that come off of the groundwater, above that level could be unsafe. So there's a ton of data in here. You can click on any of these boring locations and it'll bring up a bunch of information. You can look at the historical concentrations of groundwater. So I've chosen this monitoring well 100 here, which is sort of the highest concentration that we see outside of the plume. And you can look at concentrations through time. And unfortunately, I don't have the ability to graph this information, but a graph of this data would sort of show you like a breakthrough, right? In 2006, there was barely anything in this well. And then currently, this is sort of like one of the highest areas of contamination offsite. Now, this isn't necessarily all at the surface. The contamination is contained in a glacial drift aquifer that's about 200 feet thick. And there are sand and gravel channels in there that are what really, yes. So Eileen, I just saw your question. It is definitely possible to export these data. There's a couple of different ways to do that. So you can click this download data up here at the top, and that'll actually take you to the EGLE Maps and Data portal. And so you can download, so these are feature layers. I believe this one right here is the Allen Creek Drain. So that's these sort of cornflower blue lines that are going on here. And this is a drainage system, basically the storm sewer. You can get to the, you can get the plume layers, you can get the wells. So basically, yeah, all of this information is definitely available for download. I honestly use the website in my day-to-day work to go in here and query and look at things. You can also see all of the data itself by clicking this little arrow at the bottom here. And all of this can also be exported to a CSV, which is basically like a spreadsheet. And yeah, so you can use this data yourself if you wish. So yep, it's a really powerful tool. And the 5 minutes that I'm giving here is definitely not enough to go into the detail and depth that we could. But it is a really great tool for us internally as well as communicating with the public. So the next thing I'm going to show really briefly is called Environmental Mapper. And so I'm going to show the Lansing area. I live in Lansing, so I'm just going to do a little demo here. I'm sort of zooming into the area of my house here. And so what you get is you click on here. These are those layers that Kate mentioned, sort of peeling apart the onion. The one that's the most, useful here is the environmental management. And so if we turn this on, we start to see that there are plenty of sites around us that have at least some sort of contamination. So Part 201 sites, these brown squares, these are contaminated sites in general. It could be any number of things that make things a 201 site. There's a huge list of regulated substances. And if any of them exceed any of our criteria, it basically becomes a Part 201 facility. You also see on here, so that the other part of remediation and redevelopment vision, we work with leaking underground storage tanks. So if you go to a gas station, the gasoline is stored in underground storage tanks, and those leak occasionally. And so we can see all the locations of all of the leaking underground storage tanks, those that are open, those that are closed, and sites of environmental contamination. This information can also be exported. So you see here these little buttons below each of these different types of data. So you could export a shape file for use in a like ArcGIS. If you prefer Google Earth, you can also export KML files. There's also another way to export information here, which I'm going to show you really quick. So there's a few tools, but the one that I'm going to do, the one that most people want to know is like, oh, what's around my house? So, if you wanted to say, no, how many contaminated sites and what are they within a mile of my house? So you can use this buffer tool. And I'm going to just go for Part 201 facilities, these brown squares here. And so we're going to do a buffer around a point. We're going to do a distance of 1 mile. And I'll just click on where my house is. and it creates this buffer for me. And you can see that there are 4 environmental sites, 4 201 sites within a mile of my house. And you can also get more information about any of those. And when you do that, it'll take you to what's called RIDE, the Remediation Information and Data Exchange. And basically, Environmental Mapper is updated live from RIDE. The two are connected. So anytime a project manager in RRD puts something into RIDE, it'll immediately show up on Environmental Mapper. So it is a pretty comprehensive part of what we do. And, a lot of people, you can come here as the public. We advise a lot of people to go ahead and look here. And like I said, you can also export this information. Unfortunately, the only way you can get this is as an Excel file. But, if you have a little bit of GIS acumen, you can take these latitude and longitudes and plot those as points if you wanted to make like your own map in ArcGIS. And so that is Environmental Mapper. I think those are probably like the main parts that people are interested in, but I would certainly implore you to go out and just sort of poke around and see what you can find and explore. It's, a very informative tool. So the last thing that I'm going to go into with the short amount of time that I have left here is this dry cleaner GIS model that I have developed. So for those of you that don't know, dry cleaners are typically pretty contaminated sites. The solvents that are used for dry cleaning can get everywhere, even if you don't even know it's happening. They can be getting released to the environment. And unfortunately, old dry cleaners before the advent of real environmental regulation, and they probably didn't know any better, but they would just take these solvents when they were done with them and dump them out the back door. And so a lot of that gets released to the environment in that way. Unfortunately, these chemicals are harmful to health. They can have either chronic or acute toxic effects on people. And one of the things that I'd like to just show you here is, so this is the Jackson district. It's these 5 counties in southeastern Michigan. And all of these green and blue dots that you see here are current or former dry cleaners. And there are actually more than this. These are just the ones that are in our database. We got this from our air quality division. But like, for example, in Ann Arbor, I was doing some historical records review and found about 15 additional dry cleaners that weren't listed here. So all of those sites could potentially have environmental impacts. And just some numbers, the numbers that you'll hear vary, but basically anywhere from 80 to 99% of dry cleaners can have some form of environmental impact. So what we wanted to do, we have a gas station triage program where we go out and we sample gas stations, and we can then give that data to people to make decisions about how to manage the site. But because dry cleaners have environmental impacts, we wanted to develop a triage program. So as part of developing that triage program, we developed this GIS model to sort of guide our activities. We wanted to say, well, we know there are all these dry cleaners, there's at least 120 on this map. Where do we really go to focus on the ones that may have the highest risk? So I developed this GIS model, and there's sort of 2 parts. So what you see here, the sort of colored area is the physical score, is what I call it. And the physical score is a combination of soil drainage, glacial geology, and groundwater recharge. And essentially, you add those pieces of information together and you get this physical score. So places where you'd see red are places where the geology, the physical characteristics of the site are, maybe more dangerous. They might have a higher risk to them. And then in addition to that, these colored circles that you see, those are what we call the demographic scores. And so those are color coded. The red ones are obviously like, oh, this is scarier. And so, those have to do with the amount of people that live nearby. So you can actually use ArcGIS to, it's called enriching these polygons. And it basically looks at census data and says, okay, within 500 feet of this point, so maybe here we only have, 50 people that live in that area. But here we might have, several hundred. And so we used this as a tool to sort of guide our pilot program for this triage investigation, where we wanted to go out and find the sort of riskiest sites, the ones that might have impacts that might actually affect people's life and health. And I see that I'm sort of out of time. So, spoiler, we looked at 4 different dry cleaners. Of those 4 dry cleaners, all of them did have some contamination that we were able to detect, and 2 of them were ones that we had to basically, initiate response activities to make sure that people weren't being exposed and harmed by these dry cleaning solvents that are in the environment. So I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I think I've said enough. But if you do have questions about anything that I've talked about here and you want to go further, my contact information should be available, and I'm happy to hear from the public and chat about any of these things. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was awesome. And Kent and Kate, really appreciate everything that you have all shared. So I want to quick share one other resource before I jump back into our curriculum connections that wasn't mentioned today, but that people ask me about from time to time, and that's our environmental justice screening tool, which is actually still in draft. We're just about to release fairly soon the official 1.0 version of this. But if you're looking at this and thinking, oh, it'd be really interesting to see kind of how all these factors tie together and impact a community, that's one of the things that our staff here at EGLE have been trying to do with the EJ screening tool. So this is available through the Maps and Data portal. If you go into the web app area, you can click on the EJ screening tool, and then you can zoom in. So we can be kind of in the Detroit, Pontiac area, for example, and we can see all the different colored polygons that look at a percentile score for how a community is impacted by environmental issues. And so you can click on the little layer list up there and you can see an overall score, but then you can break it down by all the components that contribute to that score. And there are webinars available on our YouTube channel that are recorded that have gone into depth about how these scores were developed and what they mean if you want to get more information on that. But the other piece I wanted to show you about this site that is really interesting is this opportunity to add these context layers. So you can see our overall environmental justice score, and then you can add on layers like, well, are there PFAS sites around there? Or what are the urban heat island effect in that area? And you can start to see how all of these different pieces layer on and contribute to what's going on in a community. So that's just another one like the environmental mapper that pulls a lot of data together to try to look at some interesting questions and get some more information about what's going on in a community. And you can start to see how you could maybe do some of those things where you investigate around your school or around your home, what kind of information you might want to know, what you might be seeing impacting your community or those around you. So that's just another tool. We are here in EGLE Classroom kind of talking with people about what, and teachers especially, about what kind of resources they want to see around our maps and data. So if there are particular things you want to see us develop activities around to help guide your students through, I would really encourage you to reach out and let me know, because I would love to be responsive to that and put together materials that you're all looking at. Environmental justice screener is on my radar, but if there's others you've seen today that you were like, hey, it'd be cool if you put together an activity for us, let me know. I'm happy to do that. So before we open it up for questions, I just want to make a couple of points about places you can connect this to your curriculum. So as you may have thought, if you're a classroom teacher or even a non-formal educator, as you were listening to these presentations, you probably got some ideas for ways you could incorporate this information into your classroom. Like Kate said, the story map is a really cool, great tool, not only for learning from, but also for your students and your audiences to create presentations and to share what they've learned from. So there are some opportunities for educators to use ArcGIS, which is the main tool that a lot of people use for geographic information systems, although there are some other options out there. But ArcGIS has a really clear, really easy story map builder application that helps you build those when you don't even need to have a lot of technical knowledge. So that's really cool, and I really enjoy that. Some of the other local, and by local, I mean like statewide Michigan resources, include the Michigan Geographic Alliance if you're interested in geographic information and how to use it in your classroom, not only as a science or an environmental investigation, but just geography and social studies in general. And then Esri is the company that makes ArcGIS, and they have a lot of really awesome tools for educators as well, including geo inquiries, which are some guided data explorations using maps and information that they've created. And those are all aligned to science curriculum and social studies curriculum and help you, kind of work through some of that data on your own. And they also have some resources for educators specifically to learn GIS, how to use it themselves, and then learn how they can use it in their classroom. So some of the things I've listed here, I'll send out as links in the follow-up document, and I'll drop them in the chat once we get the Q&A started. I also want to point out resources that we have here at EGLE through EGLE Classroom in our environmental education programs to help you incorporate some of this information into your teaching. And one of those is our MEECS units, the Michigan Environmental Education Curriculum Support. These are for grades primarily 4 through 12, but we have a third grade supplement for one of our units as well. And they all have opportunities to explore Michigan's environment, and you can incorporate the data that we have available in our Maps and Data portal into many of the lessons and activities in these units. And as we were going through, I was thinking, oh, this would be a really cool thing to do if you were using the land use unit, or this would be a really cool investigation if you were doing the water quality unit. So check those out if you're interested in that, if you're a classroom teacher in particular. And we'll have workshops all around the state coming up from June through December for 2 of our new units, ecosystems and biodiversity and water quality. These are units that were redesigned to better meet the state's NGSS science standards. But we have another opportunity this summer in partnership with the DNR at their Academy of Natural Resources to go through all 7 of the MEECS units and get to enjoy and experience all of the education curriculum that EGLE provides in MEECS Week, which is open for registration now, and DNR has scholarships available. So check that out if you're interested. And then we also have other resources around our lending station and our career series. Career series focuses on, highlights of different staff and what they do day to day. So if you want to learn about what other EGLE staff do who maybe aren't in geographic information systems, you can check some of those out. I'll share those in the chat and in the follow-up document. And then our lending station provides hands-on models that you can use to look at these things in your classroom. So a lot of resources available for connections. I want you to also feel free in the next few minutes to ask questions and see if you can come up with some ideas for yourself too.
I also just put in the chat, I learned about this week. There's something called the Michigan Geospatial Technologies Talent Consortium, and they connect high school students with GIS training and internships, if that's something that you're associated with a high school.
That's very cool. Thank you.
It's
Kate.
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of students who actually did internships at the state of Michigan, EGLE, and the DNR. Very State cool. Police, Michigan State Police, I think. Mm-hmm.
Really cool. Thanks, Kate. Thanks. Mm-hmm. So I'll add that to our follow-up document that'll go out to everybody. So I'm just about to open it up to questions. Just want to throw it out there. Our next 2 EnviroSchool sessions for the school year are looking at compost, food waste, and you. So learning about composting, learning about preventing food waste and that impact on climate. That's coming up April 13th. And then on May 9th, we're going to hit that last that last program division that we haven't hit yet. And we're going to go to air quality division and learn about air quality monitoring and air quality modeling, and how there's some opportunities there to dive back into GIS and look at some of our resources around that as well. So mark those on your calendar if you haven't already, and feel free to reach out to me if at any point you have questions or comments or things that you want to see happen come out of EGLE Classroom.